And we're live.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 298 of the Co-op Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Bailey Jr., and today I'm joined by Mr. Gary A. Swaby. How's it going, Gary?
It's going very well. Thank you very much. Good to be back. We had a little hiatus, but there's some things we need to speak about, so we're here.
Yes, absolutely. And we do have a special guest with us here today. I would like to welcome Miss Taylor Lyles to the show, and hopefully I pronounced the last name correctly because I do not want to get sued if I was wrong.
No, you said my last name perfectly. Thank you, Rich. I'm glad to be here. Thank you both for letting me come on the podcast. It's always quite an honor when I get invited to join a gaming related podcast, of course.
Yes, and I know we had tried to get you on the show sooner, but I know I'm glad that we were able to work out something today because yeah, there's a couple of things to talk about. But before I get to that, let everybody know more about who you are and the type of work that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to summarize exactly who I am in a nutshell, outside of professional work. So I'm 24 years old. I live in the state of Maryland. Let's see. I've been working in the industry for a little over 10 years, around the same time as you, right, Rich?
Oh yeah, about
Yeah.
2000 to 2009 is when I joined.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's see. I also work. I've been like right now. I'm an assistant editor at Killscreen Media for the agency 256. So I help with a lot of editorial content there. Do a lot of stuff overseeing editing for the Intel Gaming Access newsletter, or ISGAP for short. So you guys should check that out too. We also do a lot of special like sales and like giveaways and stuff like that. So I'll give you guys a link if you want to share it with your fans later on. But it's definitely a cool subscription. I was actually subscribed to it before I actually joined my new workplace. And aside from that, also I'm also a co-host, editor, and the producer of the Gamer Nation podcast. We're currently on a month-long break as we do because we're in between seasons, but we should be starting up season 5 pretty soon. So that should be exciting.
Awesome. Yes, yes, definitely. I definitely would encourage everybody to check out that show. I've listened to that show a couple of times. It's very entertaining. So definitely check out that as well as all of the other work that Taylor has been doing, for sure. So on that note, let's get into before we get to the news. Let's talk about what we have been playing. I think I'm going to put Gary on the spot first, just because I'm curious to hear him say for the thousandth time, I have been playing Overwatch this week. So Gary, the floor is yours.
I have been playing Overwatch this week. So yeah, of course, I'm still playing Overwatch. No major updates to talk about with that. I've been having a bit more time on my hands, so I've been kind of jumping game to game a little bit. I played some Watch Dogs 2, just because I want to make sure I beat that game before Watch Dogs Legion comes out. Um, I also played some Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2 because that's another game I never completed when it first came out because there was a lot of other things out at the time. The sad thing with that is though is it seems like a lot of people aren't playing that game online anymore, so I can't really enjoy all of the features like online battles and doing co-op missions with random people and stuff like that. But I'm just playing it single player basically, and it's still pretty fun if you're really into Dragon Ball Z. So I can still enjoy it pretty much. And I've also been playing the original Final Fantasy VII, because that game is a classic, and just seeing the new footage at E3 made me want to replay it again and re-experience the game and re-immerse myself in the story and everything. So I've been playing that quite a lot as well. But that's pretty much it.
Sounds good. Yes. So Taylor, I'm going to go to you next. How about you let us know what you've been playing?
Oh, well. So as you and I have talked offline and things like that, I have all of the gaming consoles, including like 2 gaming PCs. So on my PC, I'm actually playing Visage. I don't know if you two have heard of that game. It's an early access game that was funded on Kickstarter. Many people are calling it like the successor to PT, or what they envision PT would have been like if it came to fruition. Because last week the developer Sad Square Studio, they announced that a new chapter was actually going to be released, and it's been almost a year since it came out on early access. So there's only like one chapter you could play through. So I've been playing through that because I haven't had a chance to finish it yet. So I wanted to play it before the next chapter comes out on the 3rd of July. I've also been playing Super Mario Maker 2 because that came out recently. Having a hell of a good time with that game. I don't think it's as good as everybody's raving it to be. It feels like a very 7 out of 10 for me. But I never owned a Wii U because I didn't see a reason to have one back then, because there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that made me want to buy it. There wasn't enough system selling exclusives, I guess I should say. So having not owned the original one, I'm getting exactly everything I want and what I expected from the Super Mario Maker series. So it's definitely a really fun game. I'm excited to see what kind of crazy levels the users are going to make through the years to come. I've also been playing the Jack trilogy. So I have all physical copies of the first 3 Jack games. So I 100%ed Jack 1 and Jack 2. I'm really close to getting the Platinum Trophy in Jack 3. Literally, I just need like one more trophy for that. And that's about it. What about you, Rich? What you been playing?
Well, let me say first and foremost, yeah, you definitely sold me on Visage. I definitely need to upgrade, my gaming life, because I don't have a gaming PC yet. I've spoken with you about this multiple times, saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to get one," and then always, it takes a long time. But for sure, it's going to happen this year. Before this year is over, I would hope.
Yeah, like I said, if you want me to help you find some pieces and stuff, because literally, I mean, and I've told you this too, like you can actually, honestly, you could build like a PC that's on par with the Xbox One X for about the same price. Actually, maybe about $100, $150 more than what Xbox One X costs. So it seems like a pretty good bargain to me. So, but we'll speak more about it offline, and I'll get you squared out with that.
Yes, absolutely. I would appreciate that. But as for what I've been playing, unfortunately, I haven't been playing as much as you and Gary. There's maybe about 2 games I will mention that I spent a little bit of time with. I did dive back into Mortal Kombat 11, the Shao Kahn DLC. Once again, I have to say this is definitely by far, in my opinion, so far, the best fighting game of the year. I am aware that Samurai Showdown is out right now. Haven't yet had the opportunity to play that game. I've heard a lot of positive things about the game, but it just appears to me, one thing that I have heard is, yes, Mortal Kombat 11, they give you so much content for the price of the game. Like, I'm not talking about, you talk about the DLC, but just the core game itself. There is so much content in that where you can spend hours on end, days, hours on end just playing that game by itself. So yeah, I dive back into it. I do enjoy the DLC for Shao Kahn. Looking forward to. I believe they announced that Nightwolf is going to be the next character that they're going to have the DLC for, and of course, there's other characters that they did announce, but we haven't seen any of that gameplay footage yet. So looking forward to trying that out when that drops. Aside from that, I did spend a little bit more time with Wolfenstein 2 because I'm getting ready for that new, the next game that's dropping this upcoming month.
Yeah, end of the month.
Yes.
Yeah, for end of July. Yeah.
I have to say I'm very surprised that Bethesda decided to release it this soon as opposed to making it a fall game. But again, they have Doom coming out in November, so I totally understand that. But I am very much looking forward to that next Wolfenstein game because I didn't get a chance to play it at E3. That's maybe one of the games that I wish I could have played, but didn't really get a chance to check out the Bethesda booth because I had so many other appointments that I had to play for all these other things. But just diving back into Wolfenstein 2 and playing the other side because there were certain choices that I made when I played it through the first time. So I'm going back through the second time to see how things change with the other choices that I made. So, but yeah, still a fantastic game. I still enjoyed the first game better than the second one, but with all that said, I'm still looking forward to the next game. No doubt about that. Young Bloods is going to be. I think that's going to be pretty badass. So we'll see. But that pretty much covers what I've been playing and what we have been playing. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to dive right into the news topics for this week. This first topic, I know when I saw this news story pop up that Gary was very angry about this particular news. It's definitely something is a bit interesting, but I'm curious to hear what both of your opinions is on this. So the first news to talk about, we heard reports that President Trump may implement a 25% tariff on Chinese manufactured products, which of course that means game consoles will be priced a lot higher. So we're talking about PS5 when that drops. We're talking about the next Xbox and then whatever else Nintendo does with this particular tariff bill if this goes into effect. And I do understand that PlayStation, Microsoft, and Nintendo, they are trying to band together to fight this. So Gary, I want to go to you first because I'm curious how this would impact London, I guess, so to speak, because I'm a little confused. Is the pricing, the way that you guys price consoles, is it higher than the prices are here in America, or how does that work, and what are your thoughts on this particular topic?
Yeah, we pay more than you guys, but also the pound is more valuable anyway. So I guess that kind of makes up for it. But this news mainly affects you guys, I think, or it affects you guys in the immediate, because basically it would drive up prices for consoles and Chinese manufactured hardware in the United States. And the reason Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo want to fight this is because this could also mean a lot of job losses. Because the thing is, if the price of games are higher, and game consoles, it means there's going to be less customers. Like customers might be turned off by the spike in prices, and they might opt to just not buy the hardware and games altogether. And that would mean profit losses for a lot of gaming companies and everything, and that would lead to job losses. So part of their argument for this is that around 220,000 jobs could be at risk if this tariff were to go into place. And they also presented the argument that the video game market actually makes a lot of money, brings a lot of business to the United States, which that's definitely a valid claim. And it's cool to see Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo just forming, assembling, and fighting something like this, because we're beginning to see how all these big tech companies kind of have an interest in politics and the way the world is run. And I find that fascinating personally, like, seeing what their stances are on certain things, and just seeing them unify like this to fight, things that are going to cause difficulties to an industry. So I think it's good that, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo are able to, band together when situations like this threaten the market. Even though a lot of fans out there, like, we're used to them being in competition, and I think some people always see this as like a negative thing to see them collaborating and stuff. But this is the nature of tech companies. They're always working together in some fashion behind the scenes. we just see the surface level competition, but it's much deeper than that, you know. So it's cool that they're, you know, unifying to kind of fight this, and I hope that you know, Chinese relations and with America don't continue to go down this path, because Huawei, sorry, I can't pronounce their name properly, but they were also hit by this whole thing that's going on with Trump. I know Google Android, you know, they're not able to operate on those phones anymore or something like that. So there's a lot going on right now. So seeing these tech companies actually stand up and have a say in this stuff it's always like a good thing to me. But what do you guys think?
Let's go to you first, Taylor.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's not even like the fact that this is like bad for just like for like the purposes of just like the economy speaking for America, but that we're talking about a lot of gamers that are just going to be impacted negatively by this imposed like 25%, you know, tariff on consoles and things like that. Like what, you know, Gary said, that could decrease, like there could be a lot of jobs lost. There could be a lot of decrease in sales, which could probably, you know, devalue a lot of the stock for these three, you know, powerhouses in the industry. Not to mention, more than half of like Americans, they're actually gamers. Like, I don't know if you guys ever read that gamer segmentation report by the EEDAR, but they found that 67% of people in the United States play video games. So, of course, if you break that down, like 60% of them are mobile gamers and things like that, but 52% are playing on PC and 43% of them are console gamers. So you're talking about a lot of gamers that are going to be off-put by the fact that the prices of, you know, the PS5, which could come like next year, along with, you know, the new Xbox console. So if a lot of people are going to see these, you know, these outrageous prices, gaming's already expensive as is. We all know that. So the imposed tariff is going to strike up those prices at an unreasonable kind of like price tag, which is just going to decrease the amount of sales. And it's just going to hurt a lot of businesses in the process. It's not even going to just affect the console manufacturers. So it's not going to just affect the big three, but it's also going to affect these third-party companies that are making games for these consoles. Because, you know, if there's not a lot of people that are going to buy these games and they have these big budgets, they're not even going to break even. So I'm glad to see that the big three are definitely rallying up together to try to implore Trump to not do this. But like I'm going to tell you right now, like if it does happen, there's going to be hellfire that comes from the industry, and it's not going to be pretty for the administration.
Uh-oh. I agree 100% with what you had to say. And here's a question that I believe that both of you can also answer. So if this was to actually go through, would this also mean an increase in the software cost as well? So the games won't be $60 anymore?
I could see it maybe, I don't know if it would affect digital prices, because I mean, I remember back that, what was it, the 7th generation digital games were actually cheaper than the physical copies, and now it kind of like evened up. Now it has evened up now. I mean, I don't see how it could affect the price of like the digital copies. I could see it maybe still being $60, and then the physical copies, you know, turn out to be whatever it is. But I like Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, but I could see maybe like just like the, you know, the $60 price tag still being the same for digital copies, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think that would be the smartest strategy, to keep the digital prices the same as what they are now, or at the $60 mark. And you know, if the physical copies need to inflate in price, then so be it. But you know, at least if people begin buying the digital products, that will make more money go directly to the manufacturers and the publishers, and that might, you know, that might help with some of the profit margins, because they are probably going to suffer some profit loss if people stop buying, you know, products altogether. So
yeah, you know what I'm also thinking about now that this is like the topic of conversation. I'm sure that if this was to be implemented, I'm sure the prices of like game streaming, cloud gaming services like the Google Stadia Xbox Game Pass, I'm sure those are definitely going to increase. And I wouldn't be surprised that if that did happen, that the increase of PC gamers would also be implemented as well. I could see, cloud gaming and PC gaming definitely rise in more popularity if this was to go into effect for console gaming market wise. So.
Oh yeah.
So you're suggesting that Google would approve of this decision if
I think
Trump said
would.
yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the Google Stadia is there, and I mean, if you think about it right now, I mean, like myself included, I'm still a little bit naive as to how cloud gaming works. Thankfully, the interview that I have coming up is going to help kind of this individual that's kind of like working in that type of industry for gaming. Is going to help kind of explain a little bit more to those like myself who are a little bit, I don't like, ignorant on the subject. But it's definitely, I could see, like, or at least more companies kind of implementing something like that, where it's just like, oh, a cloud gaming service. So it's like, oh, you don't even have to pay for the game, just pay for the subscription, and you have access to all these titles. And then with the PC gaming, I mean, there are physical PC discs. Don't get me wrong, but more PC gamers, like myself included, I have an all PC digital library. So I could see that, like, a lot of that cloud gaming and the PC gaming just have a higher value in the market than it does right now, just given the fact that this is a very serious thing that could really affect, like, what, 2 out of 3 households in America?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so as for my opinion on this, I absolutely agree with what you both had to say on it. I definitely am glad to see that Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony are working together. I don't want to see this particular thing get approved, but what I will say is that I'm very interested to see what happens in 2020, because I don't want to get political on this show, but I feel like there's a lot of changes that need to happen, not just regarding this particular topic, but I'm very curious to see it all starts with whatever happens next year, because I don't know when, if they were to implement this, I don't know when it would go into effect. But what I do know is that there's a lot that could change between now and November of next year. And I'm curious to know if people are actually going to remember all of the things that have happened over the last 4 years, and will they take that into account when they do decide to vote? Because if they don't, then it can't be surprised at what the results may be as a result of that later, and how it impacts everything. Because everything has a paradigm shift. When you decide to do one thing, well, there are a lot of things that can happen as a result of that. So I'm very curious to see what's going to happen next year, when we determine who is going to be next to step into office, or whether or not we're going to let Trump remain in office, because that's going to have an impact whether or not he's going to push this thing even further. But I am glad to at least know that Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo do see the problem, and they're trying to address it and fight against it. So I guess we'll ultimately see where things go from here.
Yep, let's just hope the gaming industry won't crash again like it did before.
Oh gosh.
Uh-oh.
Whew. Going back in time there, huh? I mean, yeah. I mean, it would definitely be a different crash compared to the crash of 85, just given the oversaturation of what's going on. And in some ways, the industry is slightly oversaturated depending on who you speak with and depending on, like, what kind of, like, games you're into. But in regards to, I agree with Gary. I could see the industry crashing as a result of this, at least console gaming. So it'll be interesting to see how things pan out.
Oh yeah. Let's hope that crash doesn't happen though. I feel like that would be that would impact so many people working in the industry, across everything that has to do with video games. So hopefully that doesn't happen. But we'll see. So any other thoughts on this topic before we move on to the next? Because I think, unless Gary, you had something else you wanted to add.
No, that's pretty much it from me.
So
He's
to
like,
be
I'm just
determined.
chilling. Gary's like, I'm in the UK. I'm chilling. This won't affect me either way.
No, I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
America is a huge part of the gaming market. So I think if it did, cause a major stir, that would still affect us as well, just because the quality of the games would shift, and it would affect us that way. So it's like a domino effect, kind of. So so yeah, it would still affect us in the long run.
Interesting.
So I just have to ask this final question about this, and I hate to go off topic, but I have to ask it, Gary. So would you, seeing all the stuff that has happened here in America, and with this particular thing looming, now would you say that you would still prefer to move to America, or would you prefer to stay in the Brexit affected areas of London?
Brexit. I mean, things are a little scary in America right now with all this political stuff going on. But I do love it there. I love whenever I get the chance to come over there and hang out with you guys. I always enjoy it, and I love it, and that makes me want to stay. And of course, I got family over there, so I mean, at this point in my life, I have like 30 plus years in the UK, so I have a lot of stuff here to stay for. But I will still visit the US frequently, whenever I can. So.
Absolutely, understand that. And I have to say I look forward to experiencing Brickset firsthand when I pick up Watch Dogs Legion next year. So there you go. Because I don't know if I'm making a trip to London anytime soon.
Yeah, I've always wanted to. It's on my bucket list.
Oh yeah, you guys need to come and check out London, man, for real.
One day. Perhaps perhaps what is the Gamescom? That's not in Europe, but that's
that is in Europe.
No, it's in Europe. Yeah, it's in
Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in Germany.
Well, that's definitely on my bucket list to go there. So we'll see if that happens in the future.
Tokyo Game Show is also on my bucket list too. Now that we're talking about
I would love to
overseas. All right, road trip to Tokyo Game Show. It's confirmed.
Yeah. I agree. I've heard nothing but positive things about that show also. So hopefully one day we shall see. We can all make that trip. We'll see. So let's move on to the next topic. And I'm purposely repositioning these topics on this list, Gary, because the real meaty important topic, I want to get to that after this. We need to talk about this also. So the Nintendo Switch Mini. There have been rumors that there is a new Nintendo Switch model that may see the light of day. It's supposed to be smaller in size, have built-in Joy-Cons that cannot be removed, and it doesn't come with a dock, but can be used with an existing dock. So, as I said, these are rumors at the moment, but I understand, Taylor, you told us before we started recording that you've heard a lot about this as well. So how about you start us off and tell us what you've heard about this, and what are your thoughts on if this thing is actually going to come out one day?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, there's plenty of just like data and just like evidence that could hint that this could, very well happen. I mean, it's not uncommon that a console gets an updated version, like midly through a console generation, and they get like an updated model and things like that. It's nothing. This is nothing new. It's happened in every generation in one form or another. So it's not surprising to see that the Switch is getting like its own kind of like updated console, so to speak. So I mean, there's a few like the whole concept of it. I feel it's a bit contradictory in terms of like what the Switch is going for, but I'll get to that in a second. But when you think about it, I mean, the Switch is kind of pricey when you think about. I mean, when you compare it to like what it offers in terms of like graphical prowess and things like that, like there's a lot of evidence that could suggest to someone who is on a tight budget, is it really worth investing in this gaming system? So I think it would be be great to see them have this option for those who want to play it. It's like the equivalent of the Nintendo 2DS. So and it's like from what I've been hearing, it sounds like it's gonna be that very convenient sort of like kind of handheld. I think it's a little weird that they would have Joy-Cons kind of like stick together, but I guess it makes a little bit of sense in some degrees because it's like strictly a handheld system in that to a degree. So I'm not surprised that even if it does come out that there's no like dock for it, because it's supposed to be more of like take it with you on a train ride or take it with you on vacation, things like that. But if it does come to that where it's like, okay, we're gonna make a mini version of this and the Joy-Cons are gonna be stuck to the screen altogether, so you can't take the Joy-Cons off if you wanted to. I think that it kind of just it's a little contradictory and a bit of an oxymoron to what the Switch originally was. I mean, when I first saw the Switch, and like you guys, like please give me your thoughts on what your kind of like thoughts were when the Switch was first revealed. But when I first saw the Switch, I saw it as this hybrid system that combines everything great about console gaming as well as everything great about portable gaming. The ability to take, just throw on some Joy-Cons, take it with you, play it on a plane ride, put it back on docked mode, whip out a controller and just play the same game on a bigger screen. Like, it's definitely like, that's one of the reasons why I was so allured by just like the Switch and what it has. I feel like if the proposed model is what it says to be, I feel like it's definitely focusing a lot more heavier on that to-go portable gaming, on more of that handheld console gaming than what the original Switch was marketed to be as. But that doesn't mean that there should be another alternative option or a cheaper option for those who want to get into the Switch, because this would definitely be a lot more accessible for those who want to Switch and just can't afford one. But at the same time, I feel like it's sacrificing a lot of what makes the Switch so amazing. But what are your thoughts on it?
Okay, Gary, do you want to go first?
Yeah. So I've actually been thinking about getting a Switch for a long time. I'm just waiting for, the right time and the right deal.
Overwatch on Switch.
Yeah,
that's exactly what he's waiting for. Right.
Yep, that too. But as far as this Switch Mini, I thought about, whether this would be something that appealed to me, and I can honestly say that I don't think it is. Now, I do think there's a market for it. I think there's people out there who like the idea of the Switch, but they plan to play it, on the go and on the move most of the time. And I think this would appeal to them, and maybe also to the younger market as well. Maybe this would appeal to them. But I kind of want both options. I want the ability to use the dock as well as, bring the games on the go as well. So I think I would get the OG Switch over this Switch Mini. But I see the appeal of it because this is basically like a replacement for the DS. Like, this is the new evolution, I guess. Like,
yeah.
It's strictly handheld, it plays all the games a Switch play, and you bring it on the move with you. So this pretty much is the new DS, but obviously it's a Switch. And I mean, it's still compatible with the old Joy-Cons as well. It's just the fact that it has it has some that are built in. Yeah. So I mean, and you can also, if you have an existing Switch, you can use this one with the dock that you already have. But at that point, I don't know why you would want the additional one anyway. So unless you have multiple people, in the household and somebody wants a Switch Mini. But yeah, I mean, I think it would appeal to a small amount of people, but for me personally, I would still buy, if I didn't own a Switch at all, if I, for all the people who don't own Switches, I would still go for the OG Switch over this one. So I'm interested to see what the price difference will be, when this is actually announced, like, because that will be a huge factor as well. Because if it's like $200 or something like that, like how much is a Switch at the moment in the US?
$299.99, I believe.
Oh, okay. That's a lot cheaper than it is here. But but yeah, I mean, if it's like maybe the $150 mark or something like that, I don't know, then that's probably a good deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it really depends on what the price range will be. So
I could see it. Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I could see it being the like $100 less than, or like $150 as the MSRP, or at least in America. I don't know about the UK. But I could definitely, because like the way I see it, like not only is it more of like designed more for those people who are gonna more than likely play it on the go, but also I think this is just a better, cheaper alternative for those who want the Switch but can't justify paying $300 for one, but still want to get that experience. And again, piggybacking off of what you said too, because I was literally thinking about that off the top of my head when you brought it up as well. Is I mean, like I hate to say it, but I think we can all agree as a collective that the Nintendo 3DS is pretty much dead in terms of first party games. Not to say that I'm sure third party developers are still going to make games and stuff like that for the 3DS, but I feel like Nintendo is definitely investing a lot more with the Nintendo Switch, especially with it's just currently it's just a beast that can't be fed. And so I mean, and even if you look at some of the games that have been coming out on the Switch versus the 3DS, and just kind of comparing kind of like the exclusives and the quality of those first party exclusives. Not to say that some like they're shit on the 3DS, but like if you like as someone who has a Switch and a 3DS, like when I look at the exclusive side to side, I'm more inclined to pick the Nintendo Switch first party exclusives over the 3DS ones. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I would like to answer a few questions. So to answer your question about my reaction was when I first saw the Switch. I did have some skepticism because I know that when Nintendo rolled this out, like the announcement came of the system, and literally a few months later is when the system came out, because I believe it came out in the spring when it did launch. And typically, consoles don't, well, at least in recent years, they don't launch in the spring. They always launch in the fall. So I was already skeptical because of that. Then I saw that they were making, what the Switch actually was, where you can use it on the go and stuff like that. I thought that was great, but I know they have the 3DS, so I still wasn't really entirely, understanding of how much that would catch on. Then you add in the fact that Zelda was a launch title, and I know I definitely love Zelda, but I was of the mindset that in order for a Nintendo console to launch, you have to have a Mario game as the launch title. So I was skeptical on all three of those things. And within a couple of months after the Switch was announced, and then I know that they had that Nintendo Direct at E3 when they announced all they were working on. Then I was like, okay, yeah, I was wrong to be skeptical. This was an excellent idea by Nintendo. They have convinced me that I want to get a Nintendo Switch. So, I would say that for them to introduce this new model, whenever they decide to do it, I mean, I think it's great to give people options, but I agree with what you said, Taylor. You don't want to take away what is so great about the Switch right now. Uh, I personally think if they were to launch this smaller Switch version, this may come next year when Sony releases the PS5 and we get the next Xbox. I say that because I'm pretty sure that Nintendo, they may want to have another console coming out at that time, not a new Nintendo per se, just another option for people who want to buy a Switch but they don't want to pay the full price for a Switch. So they may consider dropping it at that time, or they may just consider dropping software because we know they are working on a ton of titles. That new Zelda game, it doesn't have a release date yet. It's in development. The new Metroid game, it's in development. We don't know when it's coming out. So they could just as easily release software next year, the bigger titles people want to play, or they could say, well, we need to drop some new hardware for people, and this could be what they actually ultimately do. But I have to say, Nintendo has done an excellent job proving to me that I definitely need to get a Switch. because even this past E3, the Nintendo Direct, that made me feel like, okay, yeah, I need to get a Switch. And I already wanted to get a Switch anyway, because there are titles on that console right now that I want to play. But now, I definitely, absolutely, positively have to make it a point to get one sooner rather than later, because yeah, they've definitely shown me that they have the software, and then they also have the third-party support, which is another thing that I didn't think the Switch was ever going to have, but it is catching on now. It does not have games like Cyberpunk 2077. You won't see that on the Switch, but hey, you never know. That might happen in the future. You never know.
I mean, hey, they got The Witcher 3 coming out, so...
Exactly. So it's definitely possible, at least. It's possible to think about what the future can hold, but yeah, I 100% am sold on the Switch. So if I was to get a Switch, well, when I get a Switch, I'm probably going to go with just the standard Switch. I don't know about this mini, if this thing comes out, but yeah, Nintendo. I must admit, I was skeptical. Not anymore. I'm 100% sold on this. I see it still selling well, and I also find it very fascinating how the games they released on the Wii U, such as the Smash Brothers and the Mario Kart game, pretty much re-released on Switch, and they constantly are on NPDs every other month. So that tells me, yes, this device is a success. It's still selling like hotcakes. So I absolutely positively need to get one. Deal or no deal, I definitely gotta get one.
So in a way, it is a deal.
Yes, absolutely.
It's deal or no deal, but still a deal.
And regardless if there are any sales, I think it's 100% worth the price. But yeah, I have to get one.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I'm someone who loves JRPGs, and I feel like Nintendo Switch is becoming like the number 2 best platform for JRPGs, with the number 1 is currently PC, believe it or not, because there's
I can believe that.
there's an influx of JRPGs coming to Steam right now, so I'm loving that, especially with the sale. Like, there's so many games I have my eye on at the moment. But yeah, like I feel like I definitely need to get a Nintendo Switch because they have a lot of exclusive JRPGs that I want to play. So
well, Gary, I hate to put some pressure on you, but I just want to remind you, the new Fire Emblem game is coming out in July. So yeah. So definitely think about that, because yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming to Nintendo. But yeah, I know that's coming out because I was looking at the July releases, and yeah, that's on there. So just be aware of that.
Around the corner, though.
Yeah, you got some time.
Yes. Absolutely.
Dragon Quest XI S Definitive Edition. And I know some people are saying like, oh, well, you can get it on the PS4 or the PC. I was like, yeah, but can you change the art style? Because you can do that on the Switch version. And plus, there's just so much other new content that you can't get on the other 2 versions. That honestly, I think I'm gonna probably double dip and get Dragon Quest XI on my Switch, because it was one of my favorite games of last year for the PS4. So, but yeah, I agree with Gary. The Switch is just becoming quite the powerhouse in terms of JRPGs, and I love that its library is constantly growing, and there's no indication of a slowdown anytime soon.
Indeed. And Richard knows of my obsession with Final Fantasy, and the fact that I buy all the old Final Fantasy games again on every device that I own. So yeah, that will probably happen again if I get a Nintendo Switch.
Absolutely. So in other words, that's also code for if he gets a Nintendo Switch and you want to get him a holiday present. Now you know exactly what to get Gary now. That's what that also means. That's why he said that. So I'll keep that in mind. I'll keep that in mind, Gary.
6 months away, everyone. So plan ahead.
Get your Black Friday wallet ready.
Yes, absolutely. All right, so any other thoughts on the Switch Mini before we move on to the next topic?
That's pretty much it from me.
Yeah.
Okay, so this topic is the meaty topic that I'm pretty sure everybody came for here today, talking about the PlayStation 5, which, as we know from history and from with the Koalition and Twitter and all this other stuff, that a lot of people said that Gary is not going to get a PS5 because of the censorship stuff with Sony. So I'm very curious to hear what the thoughts are going to be on this. So obviously, there's been some news. Wall Street Journal put out an article, which I do see that Gary has linked here, in which Sony had mentioned that they are going to focus on hardcore gamers for the next console. And they also mentioned in that the indie dev, the independent developed games, they will still get, they will still be on the console, of course, but they're not going to be featured as prominently as the AAA games that they want to cater to hardcore gamers instead. Now, I also saw an article. It mentioned that Sony wants to focus heavily on third-party deals, which is something that I know Microsoft did with the Xbox 360, so on and so forth. But yeah, Sony pretty much laying out a groundwork for which will make them much more attractive and competitive when it comes to Xbox in moving forward with the next console, because they do not consider Nintendo competition, which was also stated in that article. So a lot of very powerful, hard-hitting things that were said in that article. How about we go to you first, Taylor? What were your thoughts on some of the stuff that was said this week regarding PS5 and their focus on hardcore gamers for next gen?
Well, I mean, I'm not surprised that they said they want to take that heavier emphasis on hardcore gamers. I mean, because like when you think about it too, in the grand scheme of things, if you try to be this happy medium for, casuals and hardcore gamers, you could alienate the hardcore gamers as a result, because it's like, okay, well, this is going to appeal to both, but it's clearly has enough like tone to say this is for anybody who just wants to just pick up the game, or they just see a commercial and like, this sounds interesting, I think I want to play this. So I think a lot more focus on trying to cater to their dedicated fans, and not even just dedicated fans or the fanboys, but I'm talking like, people like us, people that love gaming as a whole. So I think focusing more on that is definitely going to be great. I'm really concerned about the exposure for these indie developers, because in my opinion, I think indie developers are the backbone of this industry. There's so many really good indie titles that are out there right now that don't get a lot of exposure. And, a lot of people think, it's just because they just don't want to do that, or they're just lazy and things like that. I was like, no, I mean, have you ever tried to make a game? Like be a one-person studio and try to sell your game? It's expensive to market and get the word out, especially in this hyper-competitive industry. So I think it's going to definitely hinder indie developers as a whole if they want to get their game out on the PS5. But at the same time, this is a very good gateway for Microsoft and Nintendo if Nintendo decides to, enter the new console market early, which I don't think they will, just given how good the sales are with the Switch right now. But this will really help Microsoft get a good head start into the next generation of gaming, especially with all the support that Microsoft is doing now. I mean, because even like in the beginning of just like this generation, like Microsoft definitely fell behind very quickly with the lack of with the lack of really, and it's not like I know Microsoft has exclusives, but when you compare the quality of the exclusives compared to PlayStation, a majority of them are very subpar and just painfully mediocre. And they're like, out of all of the Microsoft exclusives, there's only like a small handful that are actually like worth buying a console for, like buying it just solely for the first party titles. So the fact that they have been very open about saying like, hey, we're acquiring all these studios, we're getting these mid-tier developers, we're also getting some of these indie studios that show a lot of promise, and giving them more exposure, giving them like some of our money to help them thrive and help them succeed. Because, even with like the previous generation, Microsoft had a lot of support for these indie developers. And that was one of the things that really helped them kind of thrive. And what made me feel, in my opinion, at least, why I felt like Microsoft won that generation just by a little bit, not a whole lot. It wasn't like a landslide victory, but it was just, it just got them just a little bit over the edge. So I think Sony should reconsider trying to to shun these indie developers, because I feel like there's going to be a lot of indie titles. Like, I mean, like Cuphead is a good example of that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you know, like Sony doesn't want to miss the next Cuphead, because if they do this, what if they do that? What if, you know, suppose there's just like a slew of just different indie titles that are coming out on Microsoft's console. Everyone's like, okay, so, you know, I just feel like I feel like they're just not thinking that far ahead, which, okay, that's a bit of an oversight. And, you know, I get that, but I mean, they do have a lot of promising, you know, IPs right now under their belt that could definitely kind of compensate that. But again, like in terms of like the people who love indie games, you're definitely alienating those gamers, because those are hardcore gamers as well.
Oh, absolutely. And to go to what you said about the indie devs, because I'm gonna go to Gary after this. If I was to think of why they would make this decision, how much money did Sony invest in No Man's Sky? Because we know that game had some issues. I'm wondering if that left a bad taste in their mouth, and they said, you know what, we need to stick with what we know works, which is the AAA stuff, and let's just put more money into that instead of the indie stuff. But that's just a question for you guys. I don't know what your opinions are on that.
I mean, I think I think I understand the whole like concept of why they should be a little bit like on the suspect of like making sure they're not investing money, because they got backlash for it when No Man's Sky did come out in the state that it was in. They got shit for it, and they had to say, hey, we were just publishing the game. We had no say in the development, which I think that's how a publisher-developer relationship should be. Unless the publisher owns that IP, they shouldn't really be micromanaging what's going on in the development cycle. But again, like what Hello Games did was false advertisement, so I can understand why it has a bad taste on their mouth, just because of that. But I don't think they should let that one really bad experience just like completely just shun other developers, especially when you consider there's a lot of people out here who sacrifice so much of their life and so much of their finances to make this game come out. Like Dustin Elysian Tale, it was literally a guy who was like living in his parents' basement, eating off ramen noodles for like a few years, maybe 3-5 years, and he made one of the best damn games that ever came out in this generation. So it's one of those things where it's like they need to have, I guess, a subdivision of people that can kind of help, I guess, curate this sort of thing. Similar, or at least has something like what Square Enix has in the form of the Square Enix Collective, where they're giving these indie titles like their exposure and things like that. But even then, that's its own kind of like entity, but it's still under the Square Enix brand. Maybe doing something like that should be something they should look into. But I think completely hindering these small indie devs is going to affect them on the long term, especially if they say, no, this is like our firm like thing, like this is what we're going to do. And not to mention too, Google Stadia is coming out too, so who's to say that those indie, like Google might not kind of buy, like, you know, get an exclusive deal and have that on their streaming service. I think they're missing out on some money. It's one of those things where you really just have to focus, and it's really hard. I mean, it's even with like new IPs, even with like AAA first party IPs. Like, you don't know if that game's gonna be good. The game could blow zebra dick, but how are you supposed to know? Like, oh, it's a AAA title, so it must be good. That doesn't mean anything. There's so many games that we all could list that were AAA titles that were just straight shit. So I guess just to sum it up, a shit game can be in any form. It could be in the form of an indie title. It could be a AAA title. It could be a mid-tier title. Like there's no kind of like restriction on who it affects. It can affect anyone. There just needs to be a lot more of a closer eye on what's going on and a lot more transparency in that. But just not making sure they're not overstepping any boundaries. Because like I said, if a publisher doesn't own an IP, I personally don't believe they should have any say or any heavy influence on a development cycle of a video game.
I agree 100%. So I have some thoughts, but I want to go to Gary first to get his opinion on Sony's decision to focus on hardcore gamers for the next gen.
Yeah, I mirror a lot of Taylor's thoughts. I think that's a bad idea to just double down on AAA games, just because you're in a position to right now. I think that's bad thinking because, like Taylor said, um, the AAA mainstream games are in danger of becoming stale at this point because if you look at a lot of them, they're making mistakes. They're doing all these live games, and you know they're
Well,
putting out weak products and expecting us to stay in the long term until
well,
there's more content, and you know there's a
well,
lot of
hold on.
bad practices going on. Go
Well,
ahead.
hold on. So I believe that you have some examples of some of these games
Whew.
from your own personal experience.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
like you know, Anthem and Fallout 76.
Yeah,
You
oh,
know,
Fallout 76.
I mean, hey, listen, I'm a Bethesda fangirl. I love Bethesda. I'm a big fan of the Fallout franchise, but even I can admit that when Fallout 76 launched, on the day that it launched, that game was nowhere near ready. Nowhere near ready. It needed at least another 8 to 9 months before they should have released it. And to be quite honest, it should have been a whole new year before that game had came out. That game was not done. It was not complete. Saying that game was broken would be an insult to games that do come out. Like, even if they're not good games, it just seems like a slap in the face to those games that actually were finished and they were just poorly optimized and things like that. It was not a complete game.
So
yeah.
so it sounds like both of you would say that Bethesda gave us 76 reasons why we should avoid Fallout 76.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah,
name of the title. Yes, that's what it
yeah.
sounds like.
And don't get me wrong, they're redeeming themselves. They have been redeeming themselves with constant updates and things like that. Don't get me wrong, but just like but what happened in that whole like the during its launch and the first few weeks of its post launch what should never have happened. Especially Bethesda, a company that had such a great reputation that almost lost that reputation in its entirety because of what happened.
Yeah.
It just it's one of those reasons why. Well, first off, I think it's one of those. I think there's like several other themes that really focus on that, such as crunch time and quality control and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you could really talk about that are just common themes, especially right now in today's climate for the industry, that I feel like definitely affected its launch. But I guess let that be an example of what not to do, especially when you have a franchise that's as popular as Fallout and with a company as popular and as renowned as Bethesda, that things like this should just never happen. And like I said, that's a good example of why they shouldn't just like focus entirely on those AAA games. Because you could have a product like that come out. And a lot of these games, I don't get it now either. I don't know why a lot of these companies are focusing on the long game when these games come out, because there's so much other stuff that comes out throughout the year that you can't expect a lot of those people to come out at launch and all of them to just stay in the long game. It just doesn't work like that. I guess because because the industry is just kind of like, oh, it's such a standard for like season passes and things like that, that we just anticipate people to stay on the long game. Whether the content's free or not, that doesn't mean they're always going to stay. I mean, there's so much other stuff that they can be playing that's new and fresh that they're going to want to play. Like, you can't just expect everybody to want to stay with you in the long game. It's worked in some aspects. Destiny 2 is a good example of that. Rainbow Six Siege is a good, because when Siege came out, it wasn't that good, but then they continuously wanted to work on it. It became a popular esports title. They keep still releasing content for it, but not every game's gonna be like that, and you can't go in thinking that it's gonna be like that because you're setting yourself up for failure.
That's absolutely true. And one quick question I do have. I know Gary has played this. You've also played it. Would you both say that they've done a good job with the Elder Scrolls Online and the fact that they always update that
Oh yeah,
with content?
Yes,
they've done a
I
great job
100% agree. They've done a great job with that.
So so as you mentioned, there are some people that some games that do a good job with that, but others that don't. So, but the point that you both made about the AAA titles, there shouldn't be the focal point. I agree 100% on that. But we'll see. I know Gary. I believe you were going to say a few other things, so I'm gonna let you continue with what you were going to say, and then I'll give my thoughts.
Yeah, just I mean, Sony has had some of their like first party stuff has been really great this generation, but I don't think it's a good strategy to, double down on all the AAA stuff um and just rely on that. And I mean, that's not appealing to hardcore gamers, because hardcore gamers play everything, not just AAA. We play indies and different things, and I feel like a lot of innovation comes from the indie scene as well. So when the AAA games get stale, usually it's the indies that bring fresh life and fresh ideas to the mix. And I feel like that always inspires the big publishers to implement some of these things that the indies are doing as well. And sometimes that even gets the attention of big companies, and these people actually get employed, they get jobs and everything. So it makes the industry go around, by having both sides. So they shouldn't double down on just AAA. They should also, invite the indies in. Maybe have like an indie section, and possibly highlight some of the major ones, alongside the AAA games as well. Because it's not enough to just have like a separate section for indies, because sometimes people won't even look at that. They should also, be willing to promote some of the more notable indie works as well, alongside the big marquee video games. So they need to, be actively doing things like that, to help the industry move forward. And I feel like if they continue to shun these indies, then Microsoft is going to do what they did before and double down on indie stuff, and they're going to be like the go-to place. Them and Nintendo basically, and PC are going to be the places to go if you want, more indie stuff. And Sony might end up losing a lot of interest that way.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, I mean, it's cool that you're trying to lock down a lot of these AAAs and get some timed exclusives and things like that, but definitely do not shun the indies, because you never know what can come from that scene.
I agree 100%. See, the thing about all of this from my point of view is, yeah, I think you both are 100% correct. It's always great to diversify and have a lot of different things for a lot of different audiences. When the PlayStation 4 came out, I did feel as though they were focused a lot on. They did have a lot of indie titles. They did launch with a lot of indie titles, in addition to a couple of exclusives. And the indie titles definitely, from my perspective, did pretty well. So I don't understand the decision to focus more on the AAA. Nintendo and Microsoft are already using this to their advantage, because ID at Xbox, they have their thing, and then Nintendo has the Nintendies, because they did have that showcase event. I believe right around GDC time. I know about that because I did get an email about that particular event. But yeah, Nintendo and Microsoft are taking advantage of giving the independent developers as much shine as possible, which is great. So I mean, I don't entirely think that Sony will continue will just get rid of all of the indie support. They'll still have some support. Obviously, I don't think they're going to showcase it as much as Nintendo and Microsoft are doing now. But the other thing that I found interesting about that article, and I know we didn't really touch upon this, is that it did mention that they want to focus on the AAA titles, but they also want to focus on, you know, better graphics and higher fidelity on the console, so as to say that the PlayStation 5, this is this will give you the best version of the game possible. And that particular thing is the strategy that Microsoft did with the Xbox 360. You kept hearing a lot of the third party ports where they just were fantastic on the 360 as opposed to the PS3. But now Sony is basically saying, we want to have you want the best version of the game. It's going to be on PS5. And I don't really know what this. I don't really know really how to perceive that particular message, because we don't know yet what the specs are for either of these consoles. We've heard rumors. We haven't really seen them, how they will perform in person yet. So we can't really say which console is going to have the best between the next Xbox and the PS5. But I did want to get you guys' opinion on that particular thing, because I did see that in a couple of articles that they want to focus on graphics as well. So they want to definitely give gamers the best experience possible on PS5. So, Taylor, you have any thoughts on that particular topic?
Yeah, in terms of graphics, I mean, well, I feel like the emphasis on graphics is a bit twofold. Because there are a lot of hardcore gamers that are also graphics whores, but there are also a lot of hardcore gamers that don't really care about the graphics. For me, myself, I don't consider myself a bit of a graphics whore. Just because there's so many different games that have so many different art directions and art styles that I feel like it's a bit unfair to want, like, so much like hardware to have so much power and like, you know what I mean? Like, because in terms of like graphics, I feel like when people always played like console games, I feel like graphics weren't always such a it felt more like an afterthought. But then when the Xbox One X came out, then you had all these people that were interested in graphics. But personally, me speaking, I always call like the Xbox One X a poor man's version of a 4K capable PC. But I'm not wrong in some degree. But exactly, change my mind. And I just feel like a lot of people that really put a focus on graphics, those people more than likely already have a PC, or at least have a powerful mega machine for a PC. I don't think a lot of these people that are graphics whores are always playing on their consoles. And not to say that PC gamers don't also own consoles. I am one of those people, but at the same time, like when I'm playing like my consoles, I'm more worried about necessarily like how fun is this game going to be, like in terms of like exclusives and things like that. And there's like different genres that I prefer to play a console on. And again, like when I look at a game and when I used to critique games, of course, like graphically, I would, talk about the art direction and the style and things like that. But it wasn't always a major driving point of how I saw, like how I looked at a game. I'm more worried about what the game offers to me. Like, how much fun am I going to have? Like, is it fun to play? Like graphics aren't a make or break for the quality of a game. A game could look so damn beautiful, but if it plays like shit, it doesn't mean anything.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Plus, and I know some people will get mad when I say this. I'm pretty sure that PS5 and the next Xbox will be impressive. But when you talk about the performance, the graphics, all this other stuff, I think we already know what will be the best place to play a game that isn't an exclusive. That's PC. So, yes. So, Gary, now go ahead. Your opinion on this stuff.
Yeah, so there are advancements that can be made on consoles, such as 4K being the standard for every single game, and ray tracing, and even 8K maybe. But in my opinion, I feel like we're at a point where every game looks great. And I think innovation in gameplay is more important right now than graphics. So I feel
I
like
agree.
Yeah, exactly. And you were pretty much saying the same thing. So yeah, I feel like innovation in gameplay is what the industry should be striving for right now. And graphics they've come as far as they can go at the moment. I mean, of course, do all those things I mentioned. Make it 4K, add ray tracing and all these different features. But I feel like we need to see some innovation in the actual games themselves, especially when you have things like VR headsets. I feel like there hasn't been enough done with that yet, especially from Sony's side, because they have a VR headset, and I feel like they don't push it as far as they could.
Oh, I'm so glad I'm the only one who I thought I was the only one who thought that as well.
Oh
no, I've definitely been critical of them for that, because I hope that's something they're going to focus more on with the PS5, because I don't feel like it's fair for all those people who bought the headset and everything. I don't think it's fair that there hasn't really been a major push,
Yeah.
with VR games and stuff.
And speaking of that too, Gary, now that you brought it up as well, even looking at the PlayStation VR, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's several AAA VR titles like Doom VFR, Skyrim, things like that. But when you look at the library for the PlayStation VR, a good majority, if not all, like I'd say probably 85% of those games, they're all indie games. So if they decide, and I believe they said that the PlayStation VR would be compatible with the PS5. So if they are going to double down and just focus on AAA titles, then we need to see more innovation in the development to see if to make sure a lot of these AAA games are going to have VR capability, like Resident Evil 7, things like that. But if they decide to do what they're currently doing now, it's going to basically be a slap in the face to PlayStation VR users. And please, Sony, please get updated PlayStation Move controls. They were not meant for VR. They were not. They're so frustrating to play, especially since so many of the games require them to play that compared to the DualShock 4. Please, you got to update those things.
Oh yeah, you made excellent points right there. They are definitely, because even on PC, I mean, I don't even have a VR headset, but I see the amount of indie VR stuff that's being released, lately I've been keeping my eye on a lot of the VR related things, because I've actually been considering getting a VR headset. So I've been looking at a lot of the stuff that's on offer, and yeah, there's a lot of cool things to try, if you do own a VR headset and have a PC. So I want to see that same thing on not just the PlayStation, but on consoles too. I want I want people to be able to discover new indie games, and fall in love with them and have fun and things like that. So yeah, overall, I feel like Sony needs to think about its direction. It needs to not just because I feel like their thinking now is pretty much the same thinking they had when they were going into the PS3. So they need to be more future thinking and understand what's going to push the industry forward, and potentially keep them in that number one spot. So they shouldn't just double down on AAA games. They should be doing more. So that's where I stand on it.
I think those are excellent thoughts all around. There is one final question that I would like to ask about this particular topic, and then this may go in another direction, but we'll see. So I agree 100% that they should. I think they should diversify, focus on a lot of stuff. To have the indie titles still become a prominent thing to focus on. If you want to focus on the third-party content, that's great. And I understand the point that Wesley, aka Midnight Games, made in the chat, which he says, if I pay $400 to $500 on a console, I want to play other titles, not just indie titles. I understand that, but I do want to ask this question, because it said in that article they were going to focus a lot more of their money, invest a lot more money into the AAA titles, the third-party content, but they also mentioned, I guess the third-party deals. What are your thoughts on that? Because obviously that doesn't mean that you're just going to focus on obviously exclusive titles for your console, but it also means timed exclusive content. Maybe like stuff for Call of Duty, which will still be out in the next 10 years. I know you guys are probably getting tired of the franchise. It's still going to be out though, 10 years from now. Yeah. So I want to get, what are y'all thoughts on the fact that, because I'm pretty sure that's what that also means when they said they want to invest more money into third-party content. Yeah, timed exclusive. So how do y'all feel about that? And I'll go to you first, Taylor.
Well, I mean, if they're going to invest more money in these AAA titles and these third-party exclusives and things like that, I feel like they definitely need to make sure they still maintain a level of diversity in terms of genre. Because even when you look at the exclusives for Sony and Microsoft kind of like side to side, I feel personally that the PlayStation 4 kind of one-ups the Xbox One in terms of exclusives just solely on its diversity factor. Because it's like if you go into like different tiers and things like that, like quality and things like that, definitely there's a lot more of diversity in the exclusives that they had. Whereas with Microsoft, I feel like a lot of their exclusives all kind of like have or at least most of them are, third party like action shooting games. But then you look at Sony, who has all these exclusives that are also RPGs, platformers, adventure games, all this stuff. So the amount of diversity in genre, if they're going to focus on that, they need to make sure they maintain that level of diversity in each gaming genre to cater to all different walks of the hardcore gaming spectrum.
Oh, absolutely. And to quote Wesley again in the chat, he said they've been focusing on the third party deals already this gen. I know the Final Fantasy VII Remastered, a game that Gary cannot wait to play, it is coming to PS4 first. So yeah, that is correct. But yeah, I agree. They do need to make sure that they diversify for genre, just like you stated. So we'll see about that.
But in regards to just the timed exclusives, I mean, timed exclusives, I understand why they're a thing. I mean, I have very mixed feelings about the time exclusivity, because I feel like, making a game like, a timed exclusive can alienate certain fans. But at the same time, if it's like something like, there's different ways to handle about it. Like, I think a good example of how not to do a timed exclusive would be Rise of the Tomb Raider, how it was a time exclusive for the Xbox One. I feel like that, but there have been examples of how it's worked for other systems that like third party time exclusives have been successful and they do work if done correctly. It just depends on the circumstances, a case by case thing. But at the same time, you cannot focus entirely on these third party time exclusivity deals. You need to focus on fully acquiring like a third party game from like a company that you don't own, as is the case with like an example being in like Sony owning the Ratchet and Clank franchise, despite not owning the developer's still an independent studio. But if you're gonna do timed exclusivity deals, you still need to make sure you have a slew of first party exclusives or third party exclusives that nobody can get anywhere else. Because if it's a timed exclusive, who's to say, how are you going to sell this person who wants to buy a Microsoft console over a PlayStation console? They're like, oh, well, this game's coming out soon for the PlayStation. Oh, but it's only going to be a timed exclusive for a year. But suppose there's like a console exclusive on Xbox that they really, really want. So it's like, and they're like, okay, well, this game's going to come out in a year anyways. I can wait a little bit longer. So making sure you have a nice balance of first party and third party exclusives as well as timed exclusive deals will definitely help kind of like, prevail you in that console war, or, you know what I mean? So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Gary, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. They need to have balance. So yeah, you need to have those timed exclusive deals, because obviously that adds a lot of value to the brand and everything, and it will make people choose your console over the other. But you also need to have a lot of exclusive first party stuff as well, so that you're keeping the gamers engaged, as they continue to beat these games and move on to the next one. So there's always something exclusive to play that's adding more value to the PlayStation brand. So yeah, they definitely need that balance. And in addition to that, like we've been saying, they also need the indies too. So if you're able to have all those things in one, then that puts you in an excellent position. And I feel like Sony's been in an excellent position for most of this generation. That's pretty much what they've been delivering on. They've had the time exclusive stuff, they've had the great first party stuff, and they've had indie stuff, and they've used PlayStation Plus to kind of put the focus on a lot of these different indie games as well. So they just need to keep that formula going, really. And I don't think they should double down on just one area. They need to just, keep doing what they've been doing, and also show some love to the VR, scene and everything. And they pretty much already have a lot of momentum going into next generation, more so than Microsoft, in my opinion. So,
Whoa, ooh,
so
ouch.
yeah, I mean, the only
Uh,
thing I would say is Microsoft has been preparing for next generation, and they've secured a lot of great studios. And I feel like maybe Sony should do some of that too. Like maybe they could expand some of their studios and build some
so
more, so that some of these studios won't have to crunch as much. Um, so maybe that's something they should think about.
yeah, so this will be the last question for this particular. Since you brought it up, I have to ask. So, just if the both of you was to give a, I guess, a prediction, so to speak, what are some of the games that you think we will definitely see on PS5 when whether it's a launch game or it comes out after? What are some games you for sure think which will back up the point that you say they already have a lot of momentum going into next gen, and we don't have to worry about their library of games. So, whoever wants to go first.
I'll go first. So yeah. I mean, because well, first off, let me focus. Let me talk a little bit about some of the PlayStation 4 exclusives that are coming out towards the end of this console generation. I wouldn't be surprised if they ported over like the Final Fantasy VII remake. I'm not saying it should be a launch title for the PS5, but if it comes out within the first year of its launch, that would definitely that'd be plausible because I could see some people saying like maybe not buying Final Fantasy VII because like I think it's like what episode 1 is going to be out first because it's still going to be episodic. So I think that would be very beneficial if they released a fuller package to the PlayStation 5 for those who didn't play it on the PS4 because they didn't buy a PS4 yet because they were waiting for the PS5. I could see them doing the same thing like what they did with The Last of Us, where The Last of Us was like one of the last, if not the last, first party exclusive for the PS3. And then I think it was like a little over a year later, they gave us The Last of Us remastered. So, I mean, I don't know. I keep hearing that The Last of Us Part 2 is going to come out in Q1 2020. I keep hearing about these rumors. It seems very plausible just given what's been going on with Sony right now, but I don't work at Sony, so who's to say what's really going on? But just pure speculation leans toward a 2020 release. I could see them possibly doing that and then also porting it over like a month or maybe around the same day as the PS5's launch for the holiday season. I can definitely see a lot of Sony's best exclusives from the PS4 in this generation being ported over to the PS5 in the coming months of its launch window, like of the first year. But also with exclusives in particular, I would love to see another Spider-Man game come to the PlayStation 5. I think that'll definitely help with sales. Everyone loved the Spider-Man on the PS4 last year. It had some issues, but it was still a pretty good game for Sony, and it was definitely an exclusive that sells the system. And Sony has a lot of system selling exclusives this generation. So if they can put out a lot of that same quality games, they're gonna be okay. I would love to see them bring back some older games too. Like I would love to see them bring back the Jak and Daxter series. I would love to see a new Ratchet and Clank game come out on the PS5, although I would wish they would release one before the PS4's lifespan ends, but that just, it seems less likely as the days go on. But a lot of the games that were very popular and a lot of these IPs that they own in the past, I think they have a really good leg up. Why not bring back Siphon Filter, especially given that Metal Gear Solid is pretty much kind of like fallen out of the wayside with what's going on right now. But who's to say that they shouldn't bring that back and kind of reclaim the stealth genre, especially since there's no Splinter Cell in the works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm very disappointed. I was very disappointed to see that Splinter Cell wasn't
Same for
announced.
sure.
So yeah, it's horrible. It's horrible. But yes, Gary, some thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I have a couple hot takes here. So the first one is I think that the as far as the Final Fantasy VII remake, I feel like each episode is going to be like timed exclusive to the PlayStation 4 and 5, because this is a title like the original Final Fantasy is synonymous with the PlayStation, and because that's the console it came out on. So I feel like they have a deal with Square Enix to where these each episode is going to debut on the PlayStation, and maybe we may not even see a PC version until the entire story is finished, and then maybe they'll put it on PC in one entire volume or something like that. Who knows? But yeah, I feel like those games are going to be pretty much exclusive or timed exclusive. Um, and the second hot take, which is a big hot take, I feel like um, Bungie, Bungie's next game is going to be a PlayStation exclusive. That's my big prediction, hot take of the day. And the reason I say that is because Destiny, the first Destiny, was kind of I saw that as a PlayStation title. Now, obviously, it was on Xbox, but they had more exclusive content. There was actually content in the PlayStation version that wasn't in the Xbox version for like a whole year or something like that. So that game was, made to be played on PlayStation. Like it was better experienced on the PlayStation.
Yeah, it was the definitive version of it.
Exactly. Yeah. Now, obviously, the second one that launched on PC as well as everything else. But I feel like maybe Sony has struck like a good working relationship with Bungie, and now that they've kind of parted ways with Activision, they have like full creative freedom, and I feel like Sony is in a position to if they're smart, they would be doing this. They would fund their next project and have it be an exclusive PlayStation title. Like, I feel like that would be a major deal. Like, so I'm hoping that this hot take is actually real. But, I could be completely wrong about this, but I feel like, that could be a possibility.
Yeah, even if Bungie's next title isn't a PlayStation exclusive, there is still a lot of evidence that strongly implies that we can infer that whatever Bungie puts out next after Destiny 2, that it's definitely going to have some type of PlayStation exclusivity content, or you know what I mean. So even if it's not a PlayStation exclusive altogether, they could still do what they did with Destiny 1 and 2, where they had some content that's only available or it's timed exclusive to Sony's console, things like that. So even if it's not an entirely PlayStation exclusive altogether, there's still going to be some type of incentive for you to play Bungie's next title on PlayStation over Xbox console.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like even just the narrative of that kind of deal, it's like its own form of marketing. Like the former Halo developer is now, working with Sony. Like that would be a major narrative, a major story in the industry. So that would kind of sell the game itself, I think. So it would make sense. But those are my two hot takes.
Those are some pretty good hot takes. And just so I wrap up my thoughts on, if to answer my own question, I definitely feel like it's pretty obvious there will be another God of War. You'll definitely see that on PS5. You'll see a Horizon Zero Dawn 2. Spider-Man, yes, 100%, because that whole first game was hints of what's coming next with this with the sequel. So we'll definitely see that. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of titles to look forward to. I do think Final Fantasy VII Remake getting ported over. I see that happening. I do see Last of Us 2 dropping next year. Ghost of Tsushima, which is another game that I thought we were going to get a lot sooner. Maybe that'll also come next year as well. I have no idea. But sky's the limit. There's a lot to look forward to. And as for the Xbox side of things, well, we do know that the next Halo will be out next fall. Aside from that, Microsoft, they have a lot more to show us. Maybe we will not know about any of this other stuff though until next E3. So we'll have to wait on that. But yeah. Any other thoughts on PS5 before we move on to the final bonus topic this week?
Yeah. I hope that if they decide to do like the same concept what they did with the DualShock 4 with the touchpad interface, I hope it's not underutilized again because it seemed like such like I don't know. I felt like early on it was kind of like saying like, oh yeah, this is cool. I bet you can't do this on the Xbox One controller, huh? I feel like that would be an interesting mechanic for a lot of their exclusives in the future. I think if they do decide to do that again with the DualShock 5, they should be sure to keep in mind that they have that. I mean, because I don't know, I felt like there was a lot of cool things they could have done with the DualShock 4's touchpad interface, even if it wasn't for like third-party multi-platform games, at least with the exclusives for first-party titles and even third-party exclusives. So I just hope that a lot more innovation in terms of just like the hardware and its accessories is a lot more visible and utilized next generation.
I agree.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I would like if the touchpad had mouse-like functionality, and it would be great if that was also on the Xbox because I feel like you could bring over a lot of PC like popular genres like strategy games. You could bring those
RTS
over
would.
to
Oh yeah, I agree.
yeah.
Whew, you hit the soft spot there, Gary.
Oh yeah, like that would make it so much easier to for those games to cross over if there was mouse like functionality built straight into the controller. So um, it would be good if they, maybe refined it to work like that.
Do you think in the next generation that Sony and Microsoft will embrace more of the keyboard and mouse as a legitimate controller for console gaming? I mean, we're seeing it a little bit with Microsoft. I mean, they had that partnership with Razer, and there's several third-party accessories that allow you. I mean, with a few loopholes, well, not necessarily loopholes, but just having to go through a few obstacles to get it to function, where you can use a keyboard and mouse. And I know with like some game servers that like more specifically for multiplayer games, like I think with like Overwatch, I know that certain console players get banned if they use a keyboard and mouse, but I feel like with the way things are, especially with esports becoming such a mainstream thing in just entertainment overall, I think to embrace that as like a keyboard and mouse as a legitimate controller for these console platforms would definitely kind of help fill that void for people that want to play and are playing more competitively on console games over PC.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a great question right there. I think they should definitely, push that more. Like have it so that you can plug in your keyboard and mouse day one, and it will work with as long as of course the developers and everything give you the ability. They should have it so that you can use it with every game. Because like you said, esports is becoming a big deal. It's becoming a big industry. Uh, you know, its own industry actually. And I think to have parity, in the esports industry, it's important that people are able to play with the same tools and devices, across the board. And maybe in like a game like Overwatch, you can have separate rooms dedicated to people who want to use keyboard and mouse on console, so that there's no unfair advantage and things like that. But I think it's definitely important because there are certain esport games where you just have a stronger advantage if you use keyboard and mouse. And with Overwatch League, keyboard and mouse is the standard. Like the pros, if to be a pro in Overwatch, you have to play on PC and you have to play with keyboard and mouse. That's just what it is. So to further expand the esports market, I feel like that's an important thing, that people are all able to use the same controllers and tools and everything in these games. So they should definitely have that functionality there day one.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So, any other thoughts on Sony before we move on to this final topic?
good.
All right, so this is a topic that you came up with, Gary. So I'll let you introduce it.
Oh yeah, so since most of what we were talking about today is a lot of rumors and insider talk and stuff like that because we're in sort of the off season for gaming. So I wanted to bring back some of these evergreen segments that we had in the past where we're just talking about our personal likes and experiences with video games and stuff like that, and we're just introducing fun topics and discussion. So I wanted to start off by having this conversation about what is your favorite video game from the 90s basically, and we're going to do this to cover different periods as well. So maybe on the next episode we'll have what's your favorite game from 2000 to 2010, and then the next week it will be 2010 to 2019 or whatever. So we're gonna start off with the 90s because I did play games in the 80s, but I was a baby pretty much, so I didn't really play a lot. So yeah, we're starting with the 90s. So we're gonna go around and basically just talk about what your favorite game from that decade was and why. So do you want me to go first, Rich, or?
How about we put Taylor on the spot, and she can go first.
Okay, so well, first off, I would like to address to the fans. I mean, you two already know me personally, but I do want to address to the fans that I was born in 1995, so but I do have a favorite 90s game because I know you guys were concerned about whether or not I would have one. I mean, I don't know. It's really hard when you ask me like which one is my favorite, because like I could honestly say I have at least like I could make a list of like the top 5. But I guess for the sake of just like this particular question, I made the decision to choose this game, The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Now I was also considering A Link to the Past, which is actually my favorite Zelda game, Chrono Trigger, Quake, as well as Metal Gear Solid for this list. But I decided to say Ocarina of Time for this, like just for this podcast, because the Nintendo 64 was actually one of my first home consoles that I ever got as a kid. The PlayStation 2 was actually the first one that I got to own as myself. Like I have a twin brother, so we shared that N64, but I was definitely playing on it a lot more. So I remember as a kid, I remember seeing the commercials for Ocarina of Time. I used to read a lot of gaming magazines when those were actually still relevant and not obsolete, as a form of gaming media. And I would see ads and stuff for it for The Legend of Zelda all the time, and I really wanted to play it. So I remember we went to Blockbuster one weekend and I saw the box art for it. I looked at the back and I was like, okay, yes, I gotta rent this fucking game. And I spent all weekend just playing that game as a kid. And it's one of my favorite, it's like in my top 5 Zelda games. It's one of my favorite games of the N64. It's one of the games that I felt like kind of defined the later half of that decade in terms of gaming. And of course, I know other people could say, oh, well, you could have also said, Metal Gear Solid or even Final Fantasy VII for that matter. But for me, in terms of my personal gaming experience back then, Ocarina of Time was definitely my favorite 90s game.
I would say that's an awesome choice. And a reminder of how difficult this is going to be to try to narrow it down to one game. I guess I'll go next, and then so then all the pressure could be on Gary to try and close us out on a high note.
Oh.
So this is very difficult for me to really go back into because I know I've said multiple times when we've done these shows, I said that I remember when I picked up the Xbox 360 for the first time, BioShock was the game that I absolutely positively, that was the game that one of my favorite games that I played on the system. But prior to that, as a fan of first person shooters, I mean I like all types of genres. I also like fighting games. But if I was to narrow it down to one of the favorite games that I did play in the 90s that I actually enjoyed, it's really two games. GoldenEye 007. That game, for whatever reason, I was hooked on that game. I enjoyed the hell out of that. Not just the story, but then the multiplayer they had in there as well. That was just an awesome experience. And right next to that, definitely Half-Life, because I did get into the Orange Box when that came out on 360. I did get back into that, but I do recall playing Half-Life from the very beginning. And I was one of those people, yes, that asked, when the hell are we going to get a Half-Life 3? And I know my answer, so I won't ask that question ever again. But, yeah, Half-Life was great. But, yeah, in terms of the games that I've enjoyed the most, definitely GoldenEye 007. And again, there's so many games that I could talk about and list out, but just to narrow it down, GoldenEye 007, that was a classic for me. So that's my pick. So Gary, now the pressure is all on you.
All right.
No pressure, Gary.
I have to congratulate you both on those great picks. Those were definitely classics. But I'm gonna have an honorable mention just because like this. This honorable mention was a big part of me discovering that I was even a gamer, and that's Streets of Rage. I guess specifically Streets of Rage 2, but I liked the entire trilogy. So yeah, Streets of Rage 2 on the Sega Mega Drive / Genesis. I fell in love with this game. I was like, I must have been like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old when it came out, and I could not stop playing the game. I loved it to death. On my sick days off of school, I would do nothing but play Streets of Rage to take my mind off of being sick and everything. And yeah, like I learned every trick, every secret in the game. I mastered it as much as possible, and yeah, it was just my go-to game. Like I would play nothing but that for years. Like even when PlayStation was out, I would still go back and play Streets of Rage, here and there. So that's definitely my honorable mention. My number one, like my actual favorite game from the 90s is predictable, so I apologize. But Final Fantasy VII, man.
Oh!
And yeah, like I said at the top of the show, I've actually been replaying it again, and every time I replay it, I'm amazed because I always put myself back into the mind of someone in the 90s. So, every time I play it, I'm thinking of the technology and the things that were possible at that point in time. And, because I'm putting myself in that mindset, I'm always blown away by the game just because they were able to achieve so much with the limited technology they had, like even just because, the character models, they're basically just small blocky polygons. But, even though they're nothing like character models nowadays, they were able to convey so much emotion. Like they were able to show us the emotions of the characters using, things like the music and the dialogue. And, even with the dialogue, I feel like I'm hearing them say it in like there's no voice in the game, but I feel like I'm hearing them say these lines like in my head just because the characters are so well defined given the technology that they were working with. So, the story that they're able to tell with that game and the things they were able to do and the scope of the game was just incredible for that time, 1997. So, yeah, that game, in my opinion, is a masterpiece. I don't, like, me personally, I remember saying this game doesn't even need a remake. But, now that I've seen the remake at E3 this year, I've kind of changed my stance on that a bit because it does look exciting. It does look amazing. And it's definitely going to be, a great new way to experience the series. But yeah, like the original Final Fantasy VII is it's just amazing, and it brings me back to that time, and I just feel like every time I play it, I'm amazed all over again. So a game to have that effect on me every time, like yeah, that's definitely my favorite from the 90s, hands down.
That's a good
Oh,
choice.
yeah, man. So I'm sorry it was so predictable, but yeah, like there wasn't another game I could pick.
Uh-oh. Well, I will say this. When we get to the 2010 to the 2019, I'm going to make sure that you were banned from saying Overwatch is the game that you enjoyed the most during that period of time. Yes.
Uh,
Oh, that's gonna be hard then.
if you were to say the 2000s, I already know what I would have picked. Like hands
See?
down. Yep.
See, I don't know if we should spoil that yet because I really want to know, but I don't know if we should if we should spoil that in case you're on the next one. But
I'll leave it in suspense. There's several games in that particular decade that I've talked a lot about because keep in mind, since I was born in '95, a lot of my gaming experience, a lot of my childhood memories were coming from that sixth generation. And there was several games that kind of helped shape me into the gamer I am and helped me shape into why I'm the professional that I am and things like that. So there's like at least 3 good games that I've talked about very consistently on Twitter specifically that it could be. So I'll leave it in suspense because maybe I'll be on the next episode. Who knows?
Yeah.
yeah,
That sounds good.
but low key, I'm gonna ask you off air what it is, just because.
I won't say okay, but I'm not. But do not ask me why. I'll give you that answer, but I'm not gonna give the explanation. I'll save that.
Okay, fair enough.
Sounds good. So, was there any other topics that y'all wanted to mention, or you pretty much wrap up the show?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. That was a lot of great discussion.
Absolutely. So, want to take a moment to thank you all for listening to today's show. Definitely would like to thank Taylor for being on. And please feel free to look to give your shout outs and let everybody know how they can follow you on Twitter, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys want to follow me on my social media, my username on Instagram and Twitter and Snapchat is Tay Nixter. That's TAYNIXSTER. If you want to hear more about my thoughts on the industry, check me out on the Gamer Nation podcast. The links in the description on all my profiles on social media. So if you just type in hashtag the Gamer Nation podcast on Google, you're bound to find us because we're actually on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on pretty much anything you can think of to find a podcast. So it's pretty accessible to listen to.
Yes, sounds good. Definitely check that out. I give it a thumbs up. So yeah, I'll do a quick shout out to everybody on the Koalition staff. We'll also take this moment to wish a happy belated birthday to Mr. Jake James Lugo. I did hit him up yesterday. So, but yes, definitely give him some shout outs. I want to shout out everybody on the staff as well, Dana, everyone, etc. And I did want to let everybody know as well that we're actually going to be doing a giveaway tomorrow on the website. So I'm not going to tell you which game it is quite yet, but you definitely want to pay attention to the Twitter account tomorrow because we are going to be doing a giveaway. So stay tuned for that in the website. And Gary, the floor is now yours for shout outs.
Yep. So I want to give special thanks to some of our long time supporters on Patreon and everything. So special thanks to M. Collins, Mauricio Aguilar, Himdil, Fergus Mills, Miguel, Antonio Rogers, and Sean Gority. We appreciate all of the long term support and everything. I also want to shout out Wesley who joined us in the chat today. And also want to shout out Reggie, who's one of the most enthusiastic gaming people I know, and we're always talking to him on Twitter and everything, and he keeps me in the loop on what's happening. So big shouts to Reggie. And I want to shout, everyone at the Koalition and everyone on the Throwdown as well. And thank you for being here also, Taylor. It was great to have you finally. So
yeah, like I said, it was a pleasure. Thank you guys for inviting me. Hopefully I was I was entertaining enough to come on for future episodes.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
we definitely have to have you back again.
Absolutely. So, once again, thank you all for listening. Hope that you have a great week ahead, and we will talk to you all next weekend.